Do you know your zones? If you're investing in overnight rental property in Pigeon Forge or Gatlinburg, Tennessee, you'd better. I'm Leanne Johnson, Realtor with United Real Estate Solutions. As an investor in the Smoky Mountains, it is critical to understand zoning ordinances because even though it's a bit boring, they can massively affect your bottom dollar. And you do not want to get caught on the wrong side of a zoning ordinance. Ultimately, researching this is part of the buyer's due diligence. However, I'm going to share some important information about these zoning ordinances to help point you in the right direction. In case you missed it in a previous video, there were 12.1 million people who visited the Great Smoky Mountains in 2020, and that number has been growing in 2021. You might also remember that the number of permanent residents in both Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg combined is just 10,000. That's tiny compared to its 12+ million visitors. So you can imagine that local residents can be overwhelmed by that massive number of tourists. So, in order to preserve the local residential communities, both Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg have zoning ordinances in place to prevent overnight rentals in specific areas within city limits. Unless you're just looking for a second home for personal or family use, you do not want to purchase within these specific zones. In Pigeon Forge, you need to avoid any area that is zoned R1. That's the key to remember if you're purchasing inside Pigeon Forge city limits. According to the latest zoning ordinance, published in January of 2019, the only property owners who can operate overnight rentals in R1 zoned properties are those who were already doing so before August 13th of 2018. Even if you buy a property in R1 that was being used as a short-term or overnight rental, that special exemption does not pass to you as the new owner. Once that property changes ownership, that exemption just disappears. I've spoken to David Taylor, who is Pigeon Forge's Community Development Director, and he and his office are a wealth of information. If you have a question about a specific address, he's your guy. And I've included his cell phone number in the video description below, with his permission, of course. But now let's talk about zoning ordinances in the city limits of Gatlinburg. Remember, Gatlinburg has a whopping 4,000 permanent residents. So for the same reason as Pigeon Forge, the city of Gatlinburg created a special ordinance in 2016 to prevent what they call tourist residences in one specific zone. And of course, it just makes sense. Tourism has an awesome impact on the local economy and jobs, but Zone R1A is set aside to promote and encourage an environment for family life and to restrict all business-oriented activities, including tourist residence uses. So, if you're investing within Gatlinburg's city limits, you're perfectly okay in R1, but you'll need to steer clear of Zone R1A. One quick word of caution: a subdivision's covenants and restrictions can always override Pigeon Forge's and Gatlinburg's zoning ordinances. So make sure you've read a current copy of those restrictions to make sure you're purchasing A, in the correct zone, and B, in a subdivision that doesn't restrict short-term rentals. There are still a ton of areas within Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg city limits that allow and even encourage overnight rental properties. Last week, I posted the first video of a series spotlighting just one of these cabin resort communities in Pigeon Forge, and more are on the way. So take a second to subscribe to this channel so you won't miss any of my upcoming videos. If you are purchasing in Sevier County, outside the city limits, all zoning limitations are null and void. Just be sure that overnight rentals are not restricted by the subdivision itself, and you're good to go. I know zoning ordinances aren't the most interesting topic, but hopefully you've learned more about where you should and should not purchase property in Pigeon Forge or Gatlinburg that you intend to use for short-term rental. Invest in the Smokies and put some extra cha-ching in your pocket. I'm Leanne Johnson. Have a blessed day.